Dude, Sean Snyder, what is up, man? First of all, welcome to the Jesse Lane podcast. You just started your construction company about 9 months ago. You were literally on the tools like 8.5 months ago. So this is actually really, really, really exciting to kind of hear where you're at. You are in the Automation Blueprint, which is my coaching program, which has been really, really cool to have you in there. You're tech-minded, you're systems-minded, you understand the importance of process and actually going ahead and building those into your construction company, and not just getting off the tools, but getting off the tools, like continually laying the hammer of project management, lay the hammer down of estimating, lay the hammer down of eventually we're going to lay it down for marketing and sales. But of course you're laying it down for admin and bookkeeping, but eventually we're going to lay that hammer down for your chief operating officer. Then we're going to get you to lay the hammer down of the CEO, and we're going to transition you into the founder. And so that's the Automation Blueprint, man. I just got chills when I said all that, but welcome to the Jesse Lane podcast. There's so many people out there, so many other contractors. How's it going, guys? Glad you're here. That we're not going to go like, hey, tell me your whole life story, but bro, like, what has it been like, the last 8 or 9 months since July last year, starting your construction company, right? And talk to us, man.
I started off in the trades. My whole life was, on and off the tools. I mean, and when I say that, I mean, I would go into construction and then I would try to go and do something else. And then I would, just kind of going back and forth a lot in my life. And, I spent a ton of time learning every single aspect of construction. Then I became a supervisor. Then I became a project manager. And that was sort of the first taste of that when I was working for somebody else years ago, that I essentially was putting the tools down in a way, and I would still jump in and I would still do things. But I got hurt, actually. I cut my finger off with a table saw. So word to the wise, yeah, be careful with the power tools. But
actually, word to the wise, don't even use them. How about that?
Don't even use them. Well,
someone's got to do it, right?
Caveat. Put the safety systems in place so that you can, teach people not to do the bad things.
So you cut your finger off.
A lot of us do.
And then what happened to your career after that?
Yeah, man. So, I was kind of in a position where, I was sort of in denial, and there was a lot of things in my previous career prior to that event happening that, I was just kind of like, hey, things will change and things will get better. And I kind of had this feeling of, I just need to stick it out. I just need to stick it out. Then this happened to me, and, I really I had to stop. I was forced to. I basically was put into a position where I had no choice. I had to reevaluate everything that was going on. And I actually, at the time, I was really worried. I didn't know what to do. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to stay in construction, but I'm going to go work for a big company. And so I went to go work for this big, heavy civil company. And we were working out at the local airport here in Denver, and building taxiways and building aprons and doing all kinds of stuff, and a lot of utilities involved in that stuff. And then obviously a lot of construction and paving and stuff like that. So about 6 months into that, they came to me one day and they said, hey, we're going to send you home for the day, and we're going to go ahead and meet you at the main office tomorrow morning. And I'm like, okay, I know exactly what this means. And so I sit down with them, and they said, hey, you're terminated effective immediately. And the reason they gave me was substandard work performance. To which I asked, I said, what does that mean? Can you give me something, that I can bring into my next career, my next job, whatever the case might be, that maybe there's something that I'm missing. And the answer that I got was very disheartening. It was, we're not going to answer that question at this time.
Oh, wow.
And that was just an absolute, it was mind-blowing is what it was. I couldn't believe what had just happened. At the time, my son had just had a baby, and he was about 3-4 months old at that point. And I didn't know what to do. And so essentially what I chose to do was take all of the experience and all the things that I had done prior with managing projects, and it was very providential for me, actually, where I came to understand that while I have been being honed and trained and being given all these skill sets throughout my entire life, I always wanted to try and do something else. And so I finally stopped and I realized, you know what, I need to go into business for myself. And I had gone into business for myself years ago. It was 10 years ago now. It was a brick and mortar store, it was a retail store. That crashed and burned, man. A lot of mistakes that I made in that, and I was not a good steward of what I was given at that time.
So what mistakes did you make back then with that business that you tried to start?
Yeah.
What type of business was it?
Interesting. Yeah. So it was an e-cigarette store. It was before anybody even knew what that was.
Okay.
And we always had people go like, "What the heck is that?" Because like there was just way more stuff coming out of your mouth than like smoking a cigarette or something like that.
Yeah,
so
and you're a little
confused.
bit before your time.
Yeah. And so nobody really knew what it was. It was kind of starting to catch on. And so essentially, we did really well the first couple of years. We grew. We doubled in business, every year for the first 2.5 years or so. And we were bringing in pretty decent revenue for that type of business. We were bringing in good revenue, but I was getting involved in all kinds of extracurricular things. At the time I was pursuing a music career. We built a studio in the back of this shop, and the studio ended up doing better than the actual shop, but it just wasn't enough to cover the bills, and a lot of drama involved in that stuff. And, so anyhow, it was poor stewardship of the resources, of the money that was coming in. We weren't necessarily, you weren't keeping up with inventory, and we weren't really doing marketing very well. And I was doing everything with 2 other partners of mine, but there wasn't any structure. There was no hierarchy. Nobody knew what everybody was going to do. So essentially, it's like I'm reading, man, well, I think it might have been an E-Myth or something like that.
Traction.
I think it was in the E-Myth.
Oh, E-Myth, yeah.
I think it was E-Myth. And it was talking about how important an org chart is. Yeah. And I'm listening to that section and I'm like, oh man, this is speaking directly to me. Yeah. And it's something that seems small. It's something that you don't really think about too much. It's like, yeah, that's kind of small potatoes. It's like, yeah, whatever. But in this book, and in my personal experience, I saw that what that can do when you're just sort of like, everybody's just kind of doing stuff and filling in. Just it created a ton of drama in a bunch of areas that all of a sudden things just started to fall apart.
So your job as the business owner is to provide clarity and structure, job descriptions, process descriptions. You are responsible for these items. Number 1,
Yep.
Number 2, number 3, and then quiz them, say, hey, do you understand what you're responsible for? And so anyway, yeah, lessons learned.
Totally.
So you took that.
Taking that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Taking that into my next, venture, which, essentially I was scared, man. I was so scared. I thought, man, I'm just not cut out for business and all these different things. And it was really discouraging. But, by the Lord's grace, man, I was pushed. It was something that I had always thought, like romanticized, like, it'd be really nice to do this thing, but maybe I'm just not cut out for it. And then this injury happened, and then I worked for this other company. I got fired, and I'm like, well, I can't wait another 3 months or something like that to get another job or like do the interview process and stuff, because a lot of these big companies, they take forever. I did 3 interviews with the last company. And so, I was like, you know what? I just got to go out and do it. I have a wife. She doesn't work. She stays at home. She, by the grace of God, she takes care of our son. And, I am the breadwinner of our household, and I need to go do something. So I went and I had some tools, but I needed to get some more. And so, we ended up using credit to, buy some tools and stuff. And I started basically just putting stuff out on Craigslist. Believe it or not, Craigslist was like the immediate jumpstart of our business. Yeah. It was incredible.
I've been there, bro.
And we ended up getting some really, really good jobs, you know,
Nice.
and I was doing it all myself. And I remember the very first job I did was this terrible job. Oh my gosh, it was terrible. This lady just wanted to replace the stair treads on her deck.
Yeah.
This was an investment property of hers, and she just wants to replace the stair treads.
Ouch.
And then she also wanted me to help secure this thing because it was falling off the building. Well, I told her, I was like, look, if I'm not going to tear this thing down and rebuild it, I can't really warranty this work. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I don't know how it was built to begin with. It's not built correctly when I went and saw it.
So is this
Anyways,
like 9 months ago when you started your company? That's what you're...
Yes.
Okay.
This was like the very first job we got
Yeah.
that we got from Craigslist. And I underbid it. I didn't make hardly any money on it. I toiled over this thing.
Was
man,
this like
and
an under $5,000 situation?
Dude, under 5,000. Try 10% of that.
Okay.
Try 10% of that. And by the way, this was desperation mode, right?
Yeah,
this is to the point where I'm like, I have to do something, right?
To provide
and
for your family.
Provide, yeah. And so I did this job and it was a horrible experience. The client's like, hey, even though I already had the initial conversation, hey, warranty this. I'm like, you are out of your mind. I didn't say that, but that was what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And so things started to progress and I started to get bigger and bigger jobs and I started to take on some things. And then it clicked one day. I was like, what am I doing here? Like I should be, whether I'm licensed or not, and I wasn't at the time, whether I'm licensed or not, I need to be hiring subs. Like I need to be able to multiply myself. I need to be able to work on multiple jobs at the same time. Otherwise, we're just never going to make enough money to make ends meet. And so that's when I started pulling on my previous experience as a project manager. I mean, that was my role when I was working for a friend of mine. Still good friends with him. He's still a general contractor. He's getting ready to develop an apartment complex here in a local town in Aurora. It's kind of Denver metro area. He owns the land. He's paying for the whole thing. It's an incredible, very, very cool thing. He now has a crew of 20 guys on payroll and he's just rocking and rolling. They're all very skilled guys and not the way I'm going to do things, not the way I have been doing things, but I'm impressed with what he's done. But I'm working for him and I helped him to essentially run his business as this was not my title at the time, but I look back and I realize I was his COO. We were constantly in meetings together. We're constantly brainstorming things. We're constantly seeing how we can dig ourselves out of this hole. Cause at the time he had like 25 projects going on. Right. And it was absolute pandemonium. It was wild. But I was also the project manager and I was also the superintendent and I was also right. And he would fill some of those roles too. So we were really, kind of just running this thing together in a lot of ways.
And you're learning a lot.
And a ton. I'm sourcing subs. I'm, and at the time and still so, he's chosen to do a different route, which, he prefers to hire people and train people and get them going. And I think that there are some downfalls to that.
Yeah.
But that's how he was running things. And so, I got to see both things. I got to see how, the time delays that were associated with trying to save money by not hiring a subcontractor and then also taking on all the risk associated with that, whatever that task might have been, whatever that trade is. Now all of a sudden everything's on you, right? There's just, it's not my favorite system. Let's just put it that way.
It's kind of like an open-ended can of worms. Like you don't know how long your guys are going to take. They're going to be sitting on the 5-gallon buckets, like whatever. So it's like sub it out.
Yeah.
It's X amount of dollars and that's it. And it's for this amount of scope and it's easy peasy.
Yep. And so I didn't even know what a purchase order was until I met you.
Here's the thing. You were paying for a lower level of builder train. And it's funny because I've always had just like whatever the top level of it. And of course, eventually we're all going to switch over to Structur. The whole industry is going to switch over to Structur software once the project management features are launched and built, which is not quite yet in 2024. But you couldn't even do change orders. You couldn't even do like all these basic things. And so you're like, change orders, you can do that in builder train? I'm like, what are you talking? Of course. Like, so it's, go ahead. Keep going.
Here's how you do it even too.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even have that.
We had a whole group call.
It says upgrade to me. And so, long story short, I was able to draw on those experiences to then realize that the things that as the COO, if you will, or as the project manager, as somebody that was in constant communication and relationship. This is my best friend, by the way. I mean, he's my best friend. We've been friends since we were 16, 15 years old. I'm 34, right? So we've been friends forever, and this guy has done so much for me in my life, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am for the things that he's done for me. As a matter of fact, pretty much everything that I know in construction is because of working with him and him teaching me and doing those things, and I'm super grateful for it. But I was able to look at the things that I felt like he had a different system, and he felt like it worked for him. And so when I would come with suggestions of, hey, this is how we maybe ought to move forward, a lot of the time there was a hesitation, or there was like a, hey, no, I like to do things this way, and so we'll do things that way. Then I realized I now have that control. I can do whatever it is that I feel like is the best thing, whether it's good or not, right? And so I really started to dig in, man. I started to dig in. I started to source subs. It's a constant runaround even to this day, right? Installer capacity is usually the limiting factor I've found with a lot of these projects, and we have a lot going on right now. Praise God. But
thank the Lord.
I'm grateful, but it's hard, right? Stress levels go up, and even my project manager now is he's.
So when along this journey did you find like me and Automation Blueprint coaching program, and like how did that all mix into the story?
Super funny, actually. So right at the beginning, I was like, I wanted to know how to get my license. I had no idea how to do that. It's different in Colorado than it is in other states. And so it was very confusing to me. I'm like, why can't I find this? I'm Googling this thing like Colorado contractor's license. Well, Colorado contractor license doesn't exist. You have to get a contractor's license in every single county and or city that the jurisdiction of that particular build is in. So I then figured that out. I watched your video, something about, how to pass the ICC test or something like that. And just I think it was something along those lines, how to get your contractor's license, something. And I remember that was kind of one of the first things. And, I was drawn to really the production quality of your stuff. And, I've always really liked video stuff. I've always really liked photography and things like that. And so, it was something that I was like, hey, you know what, this is cool. And it was easy to understand. It seems to be very clear cut. This is what you've got to do. And so I basically just subscribed to your page, and I just started watching things and, kind of picking stuff up. And I remember there were certain things that you would go over and I'd be like, dude, I've never even heard of this before. I didn't even realize this was a thing. And I worked for a $multi-$100 million
Do you remember
company.
What one of those things was by chance? I'm curious.
I think that it was really surrounding the project management software, the construction management software. I knew that it existed, but as a project manager working for my buddy, that wasn't a thing. We didn't have that thing, right? And what's interesting too, just kind of as a little odd side note, and just talking about God's providence and the way that I'm just looking back at my life, and I'm like, I've been groomed for this, and not to be, boastful or anything like that. It's literally I'm like, wow, I thought that was just a random thing I was doing. Well, I thought I was going to go work as a project manager for Lockheed Martin, coming from this construction job, before I got fired and all these other things. And so at that time, what I was doing is I was going through PMI. And I started studying, and I started doing all these things surrounding trying to pass that test, trying to get my project management, certification, if you will. It's called a PMP. And so I started learning all of these concepts about how to project manage just in general. A lot of it had to do with manufacturing facilities and stuff like that, because typically when you're talking about Six Sigma concepts and things like that, that's usually where you're talking about it. It's tweaking that one thing that's making the widget to make sure that it makes widgets at a higher capacity and make sure that it's more accurate and things like that. So I realized how important project management was, and I was using Procore at this construction company I was working for. But I was a foreman at the time, right? I'm not a superintendent at that company. I'm not a project manager, but I'm interested and I'm curious. So as I was going through that process, I think that's around the time that I ended up finding your video about Buildertrend. And I came back to it when I started my company, and I watched this video, and I'm like, I'm like, this probably is the one that I want. You talked about a couple of others or whatever, and why you prefer Buildertrend and stuff. And so I looked at the price, and I was like, at the time, man, I'm working for myself basically as a handyman. I'm not licensed, none of that stuff. And I'm just like, how am I supposed to afford even the $400, the lowest tier one, right? The $400 a month was like mind boggling. I had how am I going to sustain that?
Wow.
And so it took me a while. We tried out contractor Foreman. We tried out several different things. We tried to do it on spreadsheets and stuff, and it just wasn't working out. I got to the point one day where I talked to my wife. My wife's my business partner. She also does the office manager admin stuff for us. And I'm like, we have to just take the leap. Like we just have to. We have to stay organized. We've got to be able to schedule these things out, because as we start getting these bigger projects, it's the only way we're going to stay organized. And, I used really your video as a means by which to kind of convince her that this was what we should do. And she saw it and she was like, okay, you're right. We probably do need that. And so we got into that.
By the way,
and
I
started
haven't made
using Buildertrend.
one dime from Buildertrend. And they're like, all of a sudden now they're like, oh, we're going to give you now you're going to get like a link or whatever, affiliate. Like, guys, too late. I'm building my own software, like,
yeah,
like I'm going
seriously.
to take you over. But anyway, keep going.
Well, so Buildertrend was a big one, right?
Yeah.
And that transformed a lot for us.
Yeah, you got to have
got
software,
us to the point. Yeah, man. And even having the lowest tier one, I didn't know really what a PO was. I thought a PO was a random name you gave to the Pro Desk person at Home Depot. You know what I mean? I had no clue what it meant. Right. And I'm like, well, I had better start figuring this out. I knew what a lien waiver was, but I didn't really know how they worked. I didn't know how important it was. I didn't understand, change orders. I've had a contract for a while, and the contract's really good. I have a good lawyer. And so I figured that out early, which is cool. Mm-hmm. But it talks about in my contract that change orders need to be signed. And I started realizing, I'm like, I'm not getting any of these signed. Yeah. This is dangerous. This is bad. This could be bad,
Super dangerous.
So, this was what, 2 weeks ago, you and me we're on a coaching call and we're talking about stuff. And I'm like, I had better get this upgrade. I'd better figure this out quick. Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to Structur, by the way, because I know that, all the good things about Buildertrend are going to be there and all the bad stuff's not. And so I'm super excited about that. But just, the development of, figuring things out as I went. And I honestly, I don't remember everything, because I probably watched like every one of your videos at one point, because I was just always on the road, and I'm just like, I need to learn things. I need to pick things up that are very specialized to owning a construction company. I knew how to manage one, sort of, at least by the seat of my pants. I was able to, I've always been a problem solver, right? And so for me, I like challenges. I like problems. I like being able to see something and go, okay, this puzzle, how do we solve it, right? Kind of a thing. And it was all just pen and paper at the time. That's really what it was. And kind of fast forward to today, through all of those experiences now, using everything digitally and having everything to be very organized, and organizing our Google Drive folders so that the handoff process is smoother and all those things, right? What made
you actually take the leap into Automation Blueprint? Like, why did you decide to, if $400 for Buildertrend for the lowest tier was so much for you, like not that long ago, what made you take this leap into the monthly cost of the coaching program? Yeah,
so this is interesting. So one of your videos, you talked about, I think this was a conference actually, and I'm watching the conference and you're going over your internal site. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, like this is what I need. This is something that we need. We need to start creating a business, right? We have to figure out how to get organized. And to be honest with you, man, like 90% of that was like, I'm sure there's going to be stuff in that internal site template that I don't even realize that I need, but by seeing it, I'm going to go, oh, okay, cool. I got to do this now, right? Kind of a thing, and really start to build stuff out. Yeah. Because of you know, your experience and the way that, you know, you've built your company and you've really gotten yourself to a place where you've moved out of the day-to-day operations of everything. I remember thinking like, that took a long time. It took a lot of effort. And I'm sure there's things that are in that internal site that basically are a product of a hard fought piece of knowledge. Right.
Totally.
And so
Lots of
that
losses.
was really what, and that was really what motivated me. I thought to myself, like, okay, I can either spend $5,000 or something like that. I don't remember what it was at the time. I can either spend this amount of money to go get this thing and then just try to stumble through it and figure it out. Or then I talked to you, and I don't remember where I even saw it. I want to say that it was like maybe a Facebook ad or something like that.
I think an Instagram story probably.
Probably an Instagram story or something.
Yeah.
I don't really recall what it was. But then I remember thinking to myself, I was like, you know what? I would really like an opportunity just to talk to you about some of this stuff.
Hey, now
And
you're
at
on the
least
podcast, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I wouldn't have imagined that.
Full
for
circle,
sure. But,
right?
Yeah, full circle for sure. But so yeah, I got on the call, and you know, you were at the time you were doing the initial, you know, intake calls and stuff, and so you know my goal was just like, hey, what am I gonna get here? How is this gonna serve me, right? And this is really like what I'm just being perfectly frank with you.
Of course.
Is that I was like, I need to figure out how to make my money go the furthest. I need to find out how to build this business out. I need to make this work because I'm not building a business so that I can become rich. I'm not building a business so that I can buy a jet and I can fly to the beach and, you know, buy a Bugatti and all these other things like that. Those things are not necessarily bad things, but my goal is to build
Freedom.
a company that provides me with freedom, but also every generation of my family moving forward.
Right.
I want my son to go out into the world, go do a job, go learn things, go get skill sets. And then eventually one day I want to hand the reins of this over to him once he realizes that out there is really not where you want to be.
And you don't want it to
really
be a mess when you hand it over. You want it to be a system.
Nobody wants to buy a job, right?
No.
And to be honest with you, man, like, you know, a big motivator for me is that my wife is my business partner. You know, I'm the breadwinner of our household. By God's grace, we are making it, and we are making a life in a way that I could never ever imagine. I mean, 5 years ago, I was homeless. I mean, I was staying. Yeah, I was staying in my best friend that I told you about, who has just done so much for me. I mean, I can't say it enough. I'm so grateful. I'm living in a house with one of my business partners at the time, and you know, go figure, right? You own a business and then you're homeless. It's a very weird thing. While you're owning a business, you're homeless.
Wow.
I can't tell you how many times I slept in the back of that shop. But you know, I'm talking to my buddy. Well, sorry, rewind. I'm living with a friend of mine. He's one of my business partners with the e-cigarette store.
Yeah.
And one day I get a call, frantic call. Everything's gone. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. So I leave the shop and I go back to the house, and it is just in flames.
Oh, no.
It is absolutely devastatingly destroyed. And I mean, thank God, like our roommates made it out of the house. They're outside. The fire department's there. They're spraying it with the hose and everything like that.
Wow.
Dude. My dog was there. He ran to his kennel. The kennel door was open. He ran to his kennel, and that was his safe place. He didn't leave the house, and he tragically.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
Yeah, and it was. Yeah, so the emotional turmoil that happened from that, and then it just led to all kinds of just stuff. I mean, this is prior to coming to faith for me. So I already had a worldview that basically said nothing matters and everything's meaningless. And yet I feel this incredible inner turmoil about what happened with even just a dog. And obviously love dogs. They're great. This was my best friend. I mean, he was kind of, you know, he was like,
it's like all you had. Yeah. I mean,
clung to, at the time.
Yeah.
And living in a house that's not mine, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, even that was better than where, I had been previously to that.
Yeah.
And so it was like, this is really great. The house burns down, obviously not great. And then I have nowhere to stay. I have nowhere to live. Neither does my business partner or anything like that. And so my best friend says, hey, move in with my parents. He pays for the rent for this house that they were living in at the time. He's like, just go live with them. There's an extra bedroom. And so I started living there, and I lived there for like a year and a half, man, just feeling sorry for myself. Just a lot of raw emotions. I mean, there was a lot of really hard stuff that happened. Then a lot of dynamics within the business and between our business partners started to just go downhill, and that fell apart. It ultimately just fizzled out, man. And so I decided to go back to school, living in a crappy apartment at the time. That's when I came to faith, during COVID. It was in May of 2020. And whole life turned around, man. I was one way, and then I was another way. It was completely supernatural. It was the most amazing thing ever. And it was through God's word. I read the Gospel of John and came to faith, and just
amazing.
I was just a mess for weeks and weeks and weeks, just a mess. Just my whole life prior just laid bare, and I was just so grateful, man. So I really poured in, and that's one of the reasons why this backdrop is going to be the set of my theological podcast that I'm going to start once I can get myself out of the business enough to be able to do
that's
it.
exactly what we're working on, which is so exciting to see you start to build the processes and then greenlight some of those roles in your construction company. So what has your experience been like so far, like in Automation Blueprint? How has it transformed your business or your life or anything like that?
Man, I'm gonna tell you what, I came in because I knew that I was gonna get that internal website for free with it, right, at the time. And I'm not sure how you structure things now or how it's going to be in the future, but at the time, one of the perks was you join this thing and you're gonna get these things. And so I thought to myself, like, well, that's like the same price as buying it. I might as well get some coaching too, and that's awesome. And I'll tell you what, man, that is such an infinitesimally small part of what it is that I've actually received. I came in thinking, I'll give it a try. I'll give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. And it is absolutely amazing, the things that I thought that I knew that I didn't know. And that's not to say that I didn't understand them as a concept, but understanding something as a concept and then actually putting it in place as a process is two completely different things.
Right.
And I'm not saying that somebody can't do it on their own. I'm not saying that I couldn't do it on my own, but it's those hard fought years and tears to be able to get to a place where you fall, you stumble, you fail, you do all these different things. And then eventually the reason why that thing is in your processes is because you've been burned enough times on that you're like, okay, I'm not getting burned anymore. And I've always been a huge proponent. One of my big influences, just even starting the e-cigarette store. The reason why I went into business was because I was reading Robert Kiyosaki. I'm reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm reading, Cash Flow Quadrant and all these different things. Huge fan of the Big Pockets podcast. I always love real estate and stuff like that. And that was always my ultimate goal, was start a business so you can buy real estate, so you can have passive income, so you can have freedom.
Right.
And really, all of those things have been what's led me to this understanding of I've got to do something to turn this into a business as opposed to a job.
Yep.
E-Myth was a hugely transformative thing. And it's funny because I had that in my audiobook library for like years. I had it for like years.
Dude,
I never actually listened to it.
Took everything that was inside of me and verbalized it. He was like, you need to have the operations manual, the 3-ring binder, right? to give to all of your staff. And it's like, most people think, okay, well, what do we start building a bunch of Google Docs? And it's like, well, how do you build a scorecard for your, like the traction mindset, the EOS traction scorecard to keep a pulse on your business? Well, but what do? Build a Google Sheet, and so that's what Structur is going to do. It's going to have all those things, and it already does. And you already have access to it within the coaching program. So, but that mentality is beautiful that you had that kind of coming into this. Like, I understand that I need to build this operations manual, but also the fact that you need help to build it because of from someone that's been down the path that we can just lead you through all the landmines and, oh, watch out for that. Oh, pull Sean over this way. There's the path, Sean. Boom. And then we hold your hand through and help you actually build your superintendent process and build your estimator process and build your project manager process. And then, we're going to, of course, get into sales and even delegate marketing and COO and CEO. But yeah, it's good stuff.
Well, and I've always been because of those, mentors, I guess you could call it, right? Which I do. I believe that one of the main functions, I think you should write a book, but I think the main functions of literature. Eventually. Yeah. I'd like to too, but it's, time right now.
Yeah, we're getting there.
But one of the big things that a lot of like the business books and sort of the concepts and the philosophies surrounding that is standing on the shoulders of giants. It's kind of the same concept.
If someone's already done it, like, why would you recreate the wheel?
Exactly, and it's already out there. It's already been done,
and it does take some risk because you have to kind of pay for it. So it's like kind of hurts you a little bit, but then you fast track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like continuing education and it's all the developmental stuff. It's the same concept as like, if you build a strong family and you teach your family strong values, and then they take that into their marriage and then they have a family and they teach their children those same values along with being able to build on whatever it was that your parents or their parents before them did. All of a sudden, you're starting to find that ladder is being climbed as opposed to just restarting and restarting and restarting. So the same concept for me is, in business as well. I know that there's a lot of resources out there and I knew that, but it's about trying to find the right mentor, essentially. And that was what I ended up finding in this because, it's like, well, I can either try to stumble through this and figure this out on my own, or I can have someone on the phone, on a Zoom call, in person. If I come to Florida, I'm sure we'd be able to chat and have a great time. But it's paramount. It's so important to be able to have access to that wealth of knowledge.
What emotions have you been feeling since you've joined and some of the progress you've made?
A lot of weight off the shoulders, man. I was when I one of the catalysts actually that caused me to call you, besides, and it was really related to the internal site, right?
What heck
in the world is going on there?
I don't know, man.
No clue what just happened.
That is so funny.
Hey, cool.
I don't know.
Anyways, yeah, I have no idea what just happened. Okay. Hey, editor, edit that out.
Or leave it in because it's hilarious.
Yeah, that's true. It is hilarious. So the reality is that the catalyst that drove me to the internal site, which then drove me to the coaching program, was this absolute feeling of dread. I was terrified. I had so many things going on. I had no clue how to get organized. And I'm like, I just felt the world like crashing in on me. And it was because I was just selling like crazy. And it was something that I'm grateful for. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm mad that I had a bunch of business, but then you have to be able to execute that. And so it was the staying organized. It was the job costing. It's the trying to figure out like, how are we going to make sure we can track how we did on these jobs and not just continue to just do it, like whatever we're doing is just what it is. Cause we want to be able to figure out where our business is at, what's the health of the business? What do I need to be doing better as a sales guy? Or what do we need to be doing better as, as on-site personnel and things like that? And so it was a feeling of absolute overwhelmed dread. And as soon as I joined the coaching program, the very first meeting, I had watched a couple of the recordings from the previous sort of group coaching sessions. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, this is good. Like, this is really good information. And, I was able to download some of the templates that were on the Slack and stuff like that. And I just remember thinking like, okay, this is why I'm here, right? Mm-hmm. I started trying to build out my internal site, doing those kinds of things. And then I had my first call with Angel. And man, was I just impressed. I was just so impressed. I felt like I was in great hands. Mm-hmm. And it was really a relief, man. I mean, the weight I felt every time that we build out a new process, every time we get to, oftentimes in these coaching calls, Angel's hilarious. She'll be like, all right, time out, right? Because I go on a rant, right? Yeah. I'll just, what about this? And what about this? And I'm like trying to grab things out of the air. Yeah. And she'll be like, okay, hold on a second. I'm going to put a timeout on it because you're going off the rails, Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I needed that,
Yeah. Because then she'll be like, okay, one process at a time.
Exactly. And so she'd be like, let's focus on this and let's press forward on this.
If you can make it really, really good, that's actually something you never have to do ever again. And I think that's where you're getting the relief. It's like, ever heard of Pilgrim's Progress? Like this guy with a big burden on his back, and it's like every time.
Of course, I heard of Pilgrim's Progress.
I know that you have, but I don't know if the audience. But like every time you're taking something off of that pack and you're laying it down. It's like all these hammers, right? All these hammers and saws, and it's like all the tools of your business. I don't have to project manage anymore. I don't have to be this person anymore. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's. This business is a constant roller coaster.
It is.
I mean,
it's hard.
It is.
It's a tough sport.
It's an emotional roller coaster, right? One day you're on the top of cloud 9 and the other day
it's hard.
You're on the ground staring at the sky like, what's going on? And it's like, and that could be in one day, you know? And so one of the things that I've found is that every time, like you said, when we stay focused on something and when I can be brought into focus, because this is just the way my brain works. And I see it, in you a little bit too. And it's just about being very, you want to do things and you see the big picture. It's the entrepreneurial spirit, macro. Right? It's I can see the future and all these different things, but like, how do I rein them in and bring them into a row so that I can knock them down one by one?
Exactly. It's hard.
That's where I find the most joy and peace is in the business process and building this stuff out, is that I realize that my entrepreneurial spirit, it's like a fire, man. It just wants to burn all the time. And I know that some people are like the technicians and some people are like the managers.
Yep.
And
some are the entrepreneurs.
The visionary, the forward think, right, kind of person. And so I have a really hard time grounding myself in the present or the past, because oftentimes all those other things from where I want to be are just muddying the waters. And you really do need to get everything in a row in order to effectively get to a place. And that's one of the things I'm super looking forward to, is getting to the place where I am just the CEO, where I can just press forward and look forward and create those business relationships and things. But that's been a huge benefit to me, is being able to be brought into alignment with where are you right now and what do you need to be doing right now. Let's not worry about tomorrow. Let's not worry about the next day. Let's do this thing now so that we can get this out of the way. And now as revenue starts to grow and you find yourself in a position to where you can hire out that position, you can plug that person in. They can do the job exactly the way you would do it because you're the one building the system. That's the most important piece of the whole puzzle, is you are multiplying yourself in a way and you're making it so that every single process happens in a standardized way that is sanctioned by and approved by you. You're the one who built it. Yep.
If you're thinking too far ahead, like to your point, you might go out of business because you're taking future items like, let's go hire a CEO. Like, it's not time for that yet. It's time to hire a superintendent, and so that's what, and then your wife is doing admin and bookkeeping, and, I know you have a PM and a super combo right now, and we're working through that process. And so it's a beautiful thing, to do it sequentially in the automation blueprint. I think that's exactly why I built it that way, because the CEO should never be doing admin or being the superintendent on site, and then of course we do estimating and project management next. And then you can either do sales or COO kind of at that point. It's kind of up to you. And then you're going to feel I can't wait to get you to that point. You're going to feel a huge burden off of your shoulders, and it's a beautiful thing when you actually have a COO. That's an amazing level up. Like that's like where you actually start feeling like true freedom. And then when you delegate sales on top of that, it really is next level, because that completes the cycle. Because if you're marketing and CEO, and you can eventually delegate marketing and delegate CEO, that's like way up there, but that's where we're going to get you to founder if you want. Not everyone has to do that. That's like the whole next like level. But when you delegate sales, it runs without you. The whole circle, it completes the loop, because new business comes in without you having to be there. Anyway, so exciting
Looking
stuff.
forward to it.
But I like how you're doing it in order, and you're following the blueprint, and you're feeling freedom even in having your wife know what to do with admin, and then a great superintendent, project manager, them really taking the reins on that stuff. It's exciting. And the cash flow quadrant is really key. It really is, for you to be the business owner, because people are selling time, bro. I always say, like, they're selling it on Indeed. Like, you can go buy your time back, but it's not as simple as, oh, this guy says he's a project manager, let's plug him in. Like, and he's a D player all of a sudden, and he ruins your business. So I love being able to help you inside the program really find A players and train them on your process that we've built with you, according to what you want for your business, your values, your processes, your whatever softwares you guys all decide to use. Hopefully it's Structur in the future. But so man, it's really been a pleasure.
Likewise, and I haven't even tapped. I know that there's so much more in there, and that's just a function of time, and it's a function of, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy, because it's not a silver bullet. I said that to another guy, that I had referred to the program, and I told him, he's like, yeah, but I like to do things the hard way or something. And I'm like, no, you don't, bro. No, you don't. You might say that now, but things start getting crazy and hectic. That's where businesses can fall apart. And I was like, I don't hope for that for you at all. But
we do have a lot of templates, but it's really important that it's not the silver bullet. It's just, you can't just plug it. It's not totally plug and play, although we have tons to pull from. But you really want to piece it all together to what makes sense for you. And I think that's a concept that you've really understood, and I think that'll behoove you to build it for yourself. For sure. It's your business, and so you're doing it right. It doesn't have to be super hard, but you understand the concept of putting in the work, and so it's exciting. We've had people come into the program and they think they don't have to do any work, and they don't wind up being a good fit. But guys like you, and I think 90% of the people who have joined have stuck with it, and they understand that it's going to take some work from their part, but we're here to guide and direct and lead and give templates, and so what are your thoughts on Structur so far? You've had some alpha, not even beta, but before beta access. Actually, you were the first person to ever join Structur, because like you have made history, Sean.
I'm happy to be here.
What's your opinion so far on like Structur, and what's the concept behind it right now in 2024 as far as managing your business? So Structur's awesome, man. It really is the same concept as the internal systems site, right?
At this point, where it is in its developmental stage, I mean, it really does replace that, and in a way that honestly, the internal site doesn't have the same functionalities. I mean, you've built stuff in there that I think are incredibly useful,
like the scorecards, the quizzes, the task management, like and we got flowcharts coming soon, and there's so many amazing things, places to put all your processes. This is like, if you need to go build processes, Don't put it in a 3-ring binder. Don't even put it in the internal system site. You can if you choose to, but Structur is now the new place for contractors to put their processes. And so, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, and just the organization's so key. I mean, I've found it. I mean, we've grown a lot. We've grown a lot in a very short period of time. And, you know, I've talked to some of the older guys that I know that, you know, have either been there, done that. They've been successful or they haven't been successful or whatever. And, you know, most people say, hey, just don't grow too fast. You know, don't grow too fast. And that is a good piece of advice, but there's caveats to it. And there are things about that advice that I think there's so much unsaid in that piece of advice that it's like, well, how are we actually supposed to understand what that means, right? Well, what's too fast and what's not too fast?
What's too fast is because they're putting all their checklists on a piece of paper on the 3-ring binders, on the folders that the superintendent has, and no one else knows that the checklist was even like checked off, because in Structur, you submit your checklists into your management and you have a history log of all the checklists. So it's like, that's the reason why. I love that you said that, because that's the reason why, don't grow too fast, because everything's not trackable and then it's not all in one place. And so it's like, but what if you had a deep foundation of processes and systems? Because that's what you're doing right now, bro. You're going down. And a lot of people don't want to put the work and go down, and they just want to start going up. But every contractor knows you need a solid, deep, really well engineered structural foundation. And that's what you're doing right now for your business, John. And that's the most beautiful thing to hear you say, that you understand we're going deep, we're going wide, right? And we're putting all the rebar, and we're tying every piece of rebar, and we're putting the right chairs in to hold it off the ground. We're going to pour the right amount of concrete. We're gonna do all of our termite spray. We're gonna build
right PSI, right?
Yeah, we're gonna do 5,000. We're gonna do 10,000. We're gonna do the biggest PSI you can get, and then you're gonna have this
10,000.
Yeah, then you're gonna have this foundation sitting there of a business that has a project management process, every single process built out, and a software system to run all the processes. Yep. And then you're gonna build a skyscraper. Let's build you a skyscraper foundation of a business.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that that's what's missing in the advice. I think that when somebody says don't build too fast, don't grow too fast, I think what they mean is don't let the business you're taking in outpace the systems and the framework beneath them.
Exactly.
And you know, it's like, okay, great advice, but if it was put that way, it'd probably make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
But you know, at this point, man, I mean, we've grown very, very fast, but that was a big part too of needing support and needing to be able to get into a program and start using the technology. First, it was the internal site, which now has been replaced by Structur, and upgraded seriously so. Especially because of the iterations that you've been talking about are coming down the line. And, you know, it's such a cool thing to be able to take a lot of the business principles, a lot of the things that, you know, were just concepts before, you know, and it's like, okay, I can say I understand them, but being able to take those concepts and apply that to this business. And I have other business owner friends that are not in construction. And they're like, yeah, it might work for construction. I'm like, no, dude. I'm like, it works for a pie shop owner. Read
Sarah's Pies,
the
bro.
E-Myth, right?
Yeah, Sarah's Pies.
Sarah's Pies, right? Yeah. So it's all the same thing, you know, business and the thing that really hit me about that book and what it was teaching and everything like that is the fact that people will go out into owning a business and they don't realize that owning a business is in and of itself a skill set, like development of one. It's not just the thing that you're doing, you know? And so being able to take those concepts and build them into what we're doing in our business and see it because there are things that I'm still doing, you know? And so
for now,
when I'm doing those things, if I can't, for now, right? But I'm also recognizing that as I'm trying to get to that place where, you know, things are built out fully to the point where I can plug somebody into that position, even before that point, right? Because I might have my sales system completely built out, but like I'm strangling that that reins because I'm like, this is the lifeblood of the business.
That
Eventually, I'm going to let
important.
go.
That's important that you keep that.
It is.
Until you have the other green lit.
Yes, exactly. And so, but that being said, though, I can't reliably create a perfect system, near perfect as, and it's an iterative process, right? Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but I can't create a near perfect system that at least is repeatable and that is successful time and time and time again. If I'm not following a standardized process that then flows into my estimator process, because he's got to see the same thing every single time in order for it to be a system. So that has been one of the big realizations for me, is that these processes all touch each other and they all need to flow into one another. And when you have that, all of a sudden, man, it's like dominoes. It's like you've set up all the dominoes and you just touch one of the dominoes and everything falls down exactly perfectly the way it should. And that's kind of the vision that I think every one of us as construction company owners need to have, is that and that's the whole purpose behind the name of Automation Blueprint and all those, and Structur. Obviously there's no coincidences. You named all these things for this reason, but it's about being able to push a button and every other thing happens. You've seen those videos online where they've created those crazy weird contraptions that stuff totally, and they follow it all the way around, like that's kind of what this is like, right? It takes that kind of forethought and attention,
and everyone and
intentionality.
Everything has to work together. It's a process. It's a blueprint.
Handshakes. Everybody's shaking hands.
I love it.
Effectively.
The handover meeting on all is so important, from sales to project manager, but even from the sales and estimator need to work together. But then if the project manager doesn't have all the information, and that's the beautiful part about the handover form and process that we've built, to where all the information goes in. This is the contract, this is the lockbox code, this is the architect name, this is every single proposal and drawing and subcontractor bid. It's all in this, not a 3-ring binder, not a packet. It's all in tech, right within Structur. Boom, straight to exactly where it needs to be, referenceable later, and so it's just a beautiful thing. So, all right, man. Well, is there anything else that you want to share with the world, share with these contractors out there listening? What do you think?
It's going to be okay.
I love that.
It's going to be okay. Yeah.
Love that.
One of the things that you and I had chatted about before that I think it bears repeating, we talked about on a previous call, is the fact that the status quo right now in the industry is focused on how do we do the work? How do we hang the shingles, and how do we hang the drywall, and how do we do the trim, and all these different kinds of things. And those are great things, and they do matter, especially depending upon what your trade is. If you are a subcontractor, that's what you do, is you hang drywall. Those things make sense to be focused on, in a sense. One of the things that is, I think, rapidly changing. I feel it changing. Maybe it's just within our circle at this moment, but I'm sure that there's other people that would highly agree with this, other business owners that are further along, that are in that mature stage of their business, is that the emphasis needs to shift from only caring about how the work is being done to how is the work being done in every other aspect of the management of that business, because that's equally as important, if not more so. As a general contractor, right, I'm hiring subcontractors. Those guys are going to have those processes in place, but that does not relieve them of responsibility to actually have their books in order, to actually have their processes in order, because I'm expecting them to do it the same way every time. They're going to need to know how to show up and do the job, and they're going to need to know how to fill out the paperwork and whatever it might be. That is their own system that they're going to follow, and it fits into mine. And so as we are taking on these much bigger projects, we've got one coming up that's, Lord willing, we'll see what happens. We're still kind of in the preliminary stages of this, but it's a $1.5 million project. And in order to do that kind of project, I have to make sure that every single process, every single step of the way is documented and referenceable. And all of these pieces and parts need to fit together, because it's a hugely complex system of things. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. There's probably plenty of people that know exactly what I'm talking about or know better than me even. But the status quo, I believe, is changing, especially with something like Structur. I think that when people are being drawn to the understanding that they need to have their internal systems of their business tightened down, and they need to have all of those things taking place in the background, which is really what is the structure of the business. It's holding up everything that we're doing in our business.
Yeah.
That when we can focus on that as the process that we're building out, all of a sudden that can be copied and pasted across any kind of industry possible that's out there. It's always the same concept.
And you're just watching the pieces move on the board, and you're like, then you get a COO to actually manage that. You're just watching him manage your business, and it's actually a really cool feeling.
Yeah.
And that's not possible if we don't have the ability to project ourselves the way that we would do it over every aspect of the business. Because if you're doing it yourself, which many of us have and or are or were, then you are doing things in a specific way, but it's in here.
Right.
And if it's in here, nobody else is in here with you. And so it's an incredibly frustrating
task get it out.
to try and put somebody on something, and you expect it to be done a certain way, but you haven't actually laid out
all the details
in any formal way.
Right.
Yeah. What's the expectation?
Yeah. What's the final result?
By what metric am I going? By what metric am I going to be measured? Right. And how can you ever do performance reports? How can you ever what key performance indicators, right? How are you supposed to hit those things in order to hit your goals for the year, in order to cover overhead and profit goals and all those different kinds of things? How can you even begin to think you're going to be able to do that by hiring somebody else who doesn't have standard operating procedures to follow? They don't have a checklist. They don't have forms.
Right.
They don't have access to what it is they need to do to be successful at their job and to run your business without you being there.
Love it. So would you recommend Automation Blueprint to contractors out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't say that because of any other reason than I was skeptical to begin with. And I'm not saying that I didn't think that there might have been value. I knew that there was going to be value. I mean, following you for as long as that I have, and a lot of the things that you have shared on YouTube and stuff like that I've benefited from, I knew there was going to be value there. But my initial thought was, I'm just going to get access to all this cool stuff. I'm going to get access to this internal systems,
the plug and play
templates.
Yeah,
exactly. And so my thought process was that's all I need, right? But what it quickly became was, I need those things, and I also very much require being put in the right mindset of, we've been here before, we've done this. And it's all the way down to something like a call answering center script.
Yeah.
Coming up with a system so that my phone's not blowing up all the time, so that frees up however many hours of my day, because amazing, that can happen all day, every day. It's incredible, and it's one process that blessedly so I have built out.
Yep.
And it's something that has saved me a ton
We're freeing up your whole life, energy. Bro. Your energy, your mental space. It's freeing
up my whole life.
Yeah, your stress levels.
And there's plenty to do.
Yeah.
There's
plenty more. Imagine once we get through the whole process, bro, how you're going to feel. You're going to be humming green, bro. Everything's going to be green.
Yeah.
Which means process is built and the role has been filled with an A player. That's what we call green lighting in Automation Blueprint. But Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here. Are you on Instagram or something, or do you want people to follow you somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, we started up our Instagram not too long ago. It's snyderconstruction.us, just at snyderconstruction.us.
Yes, go give the guy a follow, guys. Sean's been awesome. It's been a pleasure having you, first of all, on the show, and most importantly, in Automation Blueprint. I love seeing your progress. It's so fulfilling to me to be able to take all that I've learned over the last 18 years of construction and just start plugging it in to other people's businesses all across the world. It's been absolutely fantastic. So if you want to join Automation Blueprint, guys, jessielane.com. Very simple. And we'll see you in the next vid. Peace.